Do you remember the angry video game nerd? He used to be a really funny guy back in the days, very innovative in the field of video games and YouTube content. When I first stumbled upon his work, there was nothing like that. You have this fictional nerd character who plays a retro game and then complains about it in an overdramatic fashion. Like, who even cares about an old video game, right? That's the whole joke. So it's a perfect mixture of gaming and this comedy to spice it up as well. He became very popular, so he was quite an authority on the field of retro game scene, so a lot of people really took him seriously on whether a game was good or not, maybe a little bit too seriously. Because one thing they did not realize is that James Rolfe was a filmmaker first and a gamer second, always. He never really wanted to make films about video games. He wanted to be a filmmaker, but it just so happened that the Nerd series was so incredibly popular. So when he made the video about Godzilla games, the whole point of that video was that he is building up the criticism of the games for the sake of building up this tragedy of how all the Godzilla games of his youth were really bad, while he missed the good ones because they were either Japan only or they just came too late when he was already too old for video games, although he still plays them, so I don't know. But anyway, in the end you have the tension that just explodes when he plays the new games, and that's the point of the video. So when he came to the topic of Godzilla 2, he was incredibly negative about it, right? Probably for the reasons I mentioned earlier. But this negative conclusion really left an unfair stain on this game in the retro game scene. So a lot of people just disregarded this game simply because he made that review, and they just sort of missed the point of what his video was really about, and it did the game a massive injustice. Number 1. The turn-based strategy aspect. A massive amount of criticism comes out of the fact that it's called Godzilla 2, making it a sequel to Godzilla Monster of Monsters. That game was sort of like a classic platformer. You go from left to right, fight everything in between, and finally the boss at the end in a fixed screen. There is this sort of turn-based element when you have those hexagon fields and choose what path to take by moving on them. But that's a very small part of that game, right? Only a small percentage of the gameplay takes there. Most of it is a classic platformer. So I can understand how it can be a bit of a shock to some people to see this sequel being so much different gameplay-wise, because Godzilla 2 is a turn-based strategy game. You play as the humanity, who are mainly commanding the army units, and you have to fight the monsters to defend the city. While you played as Godzilla in the first game, you never play as Godzilla here. But still, I think that's a stupid reason to just disregard the game. And, even deeply, it shows how the concept of a sequel has changed throughout the years. So how they treated sequels in the early days of NES and what we think of a sequel today. Really, if we think about it, there's a lot of NES sequels that deviated from the first one. Like Zelda 2, American Mario 2, Castlevania 2. There's tons of them, a lot of them very successful, that weren't afraid to deviate from the original formula, and it turned out all right. And honestly, what's the problem? Why not try something new to see if it works? The way we look at it from today, it just shows how dumbed down the audiences are. All it takes is more of the same, just a new sequel repackaged. You know, oh, or maybe you don't even need this, maybe just new DLC, and that's all they need, right? We don't need the GTA 6, just have new downloadable content in GTA Online, and that's all we need today to be happy. But my point is that it's exactly the lack of this will or wish to make something new and innovate, instead of just repackaging. It's exactly this that makes modern gaming scenes so bland and boring. Okay, thank you for listening my short rant. And let's have a look at the game now. Number 2. The gameplay. The game goes straight to the point. Godzilla has appeared, scramble the army, get ready, defend the city. The game is divided by scenarios that are numbered but don't necessarily need to be played in any order. You start the game, the monsters spawn, your units spawn, and there you go, you're ready to go fight now, engage the monsters. Once you get to the actual battle part, the outcome seems to be determined by a slot machine, for some reason. This is another part that's very wildly criticized, but really, let's take a step back, right? To be honest, all games like this use some sort of a slot machine. All turn-based tactics/strategy games use the computer to calculate a random calculation that will determine whether it's a hit, a miss, if it does more damage, less damage. It's always like that. There is always an element of random to it. You are never really completely in control over it. It's just that here this random generator is visualized with a slot machine. It might feel frustrating, but really it doesn't have that much of an impact in the game. It's not all about luck, it's still important to use proper tactics, like you have to use the right unit against the right enemies, you have to use the anti-air gun, obviously against the flying monsters like Rodan and Mothra, and in general if you use the right tactics you will win, even if you don't get incredibly lucky. Although to be honest, there is an element of luck as well, which can give you a win sometimes, even if you play your cards very awkwardly. What's cool is that some scenarios give you an alternative way to win the game. For example, the first one, you have an option to lure Godzilla with an atomic bomb in the range of Oxygen Destroyer. This way you can finish him off, just like they did in the real film. But the cool thing is you don't have to do that, right? You can also beat him with conventional weapons. So that's pretty sweet and also very close to the original source material. Number 3. Godzilla! The thing that's often overlooked is how faithful the game is to the original film. It's much closer than the original game. In the first game, there's a bunch of weird stuff that's just made up, weird enemies, and the fact that Mothra attacks by dropping its wings. Here, the monsters, the military units, they're all the exact same units you would see in a Godzilla film. Even all the special weapons are here. The Maser weapon, the Freezer, the Super X, and the space rocket ship, the SY-3. You need to assemble it by transporting different pieces to the spaceport, so it also comes up with its own game modes as well. All of the famous monsters are here as well, and they all have their iconic abilities. Godzilla has its atomic breath, Baragon goes underground, Rodan can fly, there's even Hedorah and the UFOs. Of course, the most impressive enemy is Ghidorah, with its classical lightning attack. There's even Mothra, and she can be a good monster as well, just like in the films. You have both baby and the grown-up Mothra. There's even Mothra eggs, which they hatch just like in the movie, so it also comes up with the game mode where you have to protect the eggs, so they hatch and then you can use Mothra. Mothra even uses her powerful attack that sacrifices herself in order to win, so in this way it's very close to the original source material. Even a lot of the human characters, like Dr. Shirazawa, make an appearance as advisors, for example. So in this way the game was very faithful. Number 4. The music. Alright, we can't go past that. The game only has 2 tracks. One for when it's your turn, and one for when it's the monster's turn. A lot of people complain that this music really sucks. It's my opinion, I disagree. I think it feels a little bit like a cheesy classic Godzilla film, so in this way I think it's okay. although admittedly there is no excuse for not having more than 2 tracks in the entire game. You can use any of the iconic songs that appear in the films as well, right? Why not? Godzilla Kaiju Daikensen for the Japanese Super Nintendo is a good example of a Godzilla game that does that. They use the film music in the game, so each setting from the film has the film music as well. So this matches the tone, and it really builds up on the connection we have to the films. So if you're familiar with the films, it's going to be even better in the game because of that. Godzilla 2 completely drops the ball here. Number 5. The conclusion. Honestly, I have no idea what's the deal with hating this game. It's probably just the fact that it's a turn-based strategy game. I get it that it's a bit of a niche genre, it's not as fast-paced, it's not a button masher, it comes up with its own steep learning curve because of that. You need to learn a few tricks, you have to develop a strategy, you have to figure out the tactics that reach your goal, you have to learn the strengths and the weaknesses of both your and the enemy's units. But don't worry, it's not that hard, the scientists are there, they will tell you most of the enemy weaknesses. You will learn by trial and error. The fun in a game like this comes out especially out of thinking out your plan, deciding which unit goes first, who goes last, who engages the enemy first, who does it last. So in a way, games like this are a bit like a puzzle, really, if you think about it. It's just that instead of fitting together 2 pieces, you have to fit the right attack with the right target, if I simplify it. But, you know, once you learn this, once you defeat the enemy by using the strategy that you learned, that you figured out, that you came up with, right? You're gonna feel good, it feels good to be able to solve problems like that. Honestly, in my opinion, the concept of a Godzilla turn-based strategy game is a good concept, I don't get the hate for it. In fact, it's a little bit how the films work as well, right? The films often feature planning, elaborate plans are made by the humans that they come up with in order to counter the monsters, the city needs to be evacuated, military units are being positioned, all sort of very long plans and convoluted fictional weapons are being used to solve the situation. So the overhead tactics aspect is an appeal of the genre, I believe, that the Western films don't have. If you think a typical Western monster or a horror film, you will always see basically from the eyes of your main characters, right? You focus through their vision. The magic of a Godzilla film is that they will put the protagonist on hold for a second and just focus on the monsters fighting, so we're not being limited by what they can see, so you get the big picture, clear view in this way. You can get a good focus of what's going on, so with the monsters and the military and all of that. I'm not gonna say it's necessarily a better way of storytelling. I think that this way of conveying the story sacrifices the connection to the characters, but I think it's worth it in this case, because the main character is obviously Godzilla, and the fighting and the action that's going on, right? The human characters are always a little bit disposable in Godzilla films, and this is maybe where the new Godzilla films, the American ones, sort of fail, because in a way they try to hold on to the old formula of keeping the way we see the monster from the people's perspective, especially the main characters, and it's a losing battle, to be honest. In a Godzilla film, the human characters are always going to be forgettable. It's like that. The star is Godzilla, Godzilla is the main character, and we have to focus on him. There's no point of going around this. Anyway, whatever, back to the game. I think it's a decent game, it does its job well. It's not the best, but it's not worth disregarding because of that. I honestly wish that there was a sort of a remake of this. I think that a turn-based Godzilla strategy game with modern graphics would be just amazing. I hope we see something like that one day. Subscribe and all of that, please.